Thank you, and as Pastor Phil says, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. It's wonderful to start this second season of Roanoque Baroque. Who knew we'd come this far? A delight to be in your midst and in the midst of the family and friends at St. John Lutheran, and tomorrow at First Evangelical Presbyterian, our partner congregation that helps us promote these concerts. That's lovely Johann Friedrich Foch on the overhead just now, the composer of our first piece, this lovely overture in B-flat. Foch has a special place in my heart because my lovely bride and I walked down the aisle to his trumpet concerto when we got married. So it's just got that little niche in Baroque land for me. But tonight, we are turning to the glorious story of Johann Sebastian Bach and his Brandenburg Concerti. And on the first screen you saw, and on your programs tonight, you have that Brandenburg Gate. That's actually in Berlin and has absolutely nothing to do with Bach and his Brandenburg Concertos. But still, it's a great visual. So I just thought we'd use it. A couple things you do need to know about things that relate to Bach is you have a little card. If you didn't get one, please get one on the way out. It's got 2 hole punches on it. If you get to all 6 Brandenburg Concertos this season, the people at the door will punch out 6 times on this card, and you'll get a special prize at the last concert. So come with 6 punches, and you'll get something really delightful from Roanoque Baroque in May, but you have to hold out a long time. And don't worry about, you can't counterfeit these. There's ultraviolet light in them, and there's lead lining, and we're going to be very, very circumspect about this. But the Brandenburg Concerti have an incredible history and story. Part of my story is that this is the very first LP I ever purchased. 1967, at the Topanga Plaza in Chatsworth and Canoga Park, California. And my hero here is Maurice André, the trumpeter, who recorded so many of Bach's wonderful works and Baroque things. And tonight we have the real joy of hearing Brandenburg II, which is the only one of these that features the tiny piccolo trumpet. But even as fun for sure is Brandenburg I, which we'll start the concert with, which features the piccolo violin, which is what Rick is playing. And it's tuned entirely differently than a regular violin and plays higher, and it's just really stunning. Because Bach wrote these pieces sort of as, well, one of his auditions, one of his normal petitions for a better gig, as it were. He wrote to the Brandenburg of Margrave, and let's take the next slide here, and we'll see Johann about the time when he wrote these concerti, not the old fuddy-duddy cantor that we usually see, with his script in hand and his beer-enhanced, form. But we see next his petition on the next slide to the Margrave. And notice it's written in French. French was a language of elegance at the time. So Bach would have written this dedication to his potential sponsor, the Margrave of Brandenburg. And what he was writing for was none other than his usual, a better job. I just happened to have gotten a copy of this. A box CC'd me on the email that he wrote. It says, and we can take a look at the next slide, and we'll see in Bach's own hand, written in French. If your French is good, feel free to read along. Your Royal Highness, as I had a couple of years ago the pleasure of appearing before your Royal Highness by virtue of your Highness's commands, and as I noticed that then your Highness took some pleasure in the small talents that heaven has given me for music, and in taking leave of your Royal Highness, your Highness deigned to honor me with the command to send your Highness some pieces of my composition. I have them in accordance with your Highness's most gracious orders, taken the liberty of rendering my most humble duty to your Royal Highness. I think he's laying it on rather thick here. With the present concertos, which I have adapted to several instruments, begging your Highness most humbly not to judge their imperfection with the rigor of the fine and delicate taste of the whole world knows your Highness has for musical pieces, but rather to infer from them in benign consideration the profound respect and the most humble obedience that I try to show your Highness therewith. For the rest, sire, I beg your Royal Highness very humbly to have the goodness to continue your Highness's gracious favor toward me, and to be assured that nothing is so close to my heart as the wish that I may be employed on occasion more worthy of your Royal Highness and of your Highness's service. I, who, without an equal in zeal, am, sire, your Royal Highness's most humble and obedient servant, Johann Sebastian Bach. So that was his perspective. Unfortunately, your Highness, the Mandrake of Brandenburg, never opened the gift. They remained sealed in his Highness's library at the time of his death, and were passed on amongst his possessions, according to his will, to one of his relatives who never opened it. And it was then purchased by Mr. Kernberger, one of Bach's students, who finally opened these sometime after Bach's death. And Mr. Kernberger bought them from the estate for the astounding price of the equivalent in today's dollars of $22. So if you gave the $20 suggested admission price tonight, you indeed purchased the Brandenburg Concerti. So thank you very much for that. So we're going to go right into Brandenburg 1, which is one of the most extraordinary of the six, because it not only has the normal fast, slow, fast movement that you see, Allegro, Andante, Allegro, but then he writes an entire dance suite after it, and there's plenty of spaces in the back in the corners if you feel so inclined to have a polonaise or a minuet or whatever you'd like back there. But these extend through all the instruments of the orchestra, and I think what Bach was doing was showing that A, he could write for all the instruments of the orchestra, and B, to tickle our ears and our taste to hear the unique characteristics of the piccolo violin, the French horns, the oboes, the regular members of the string ensemble, the harpsichord, all featured in some unique way in one of these changing dance movements. So, without further ado, the first of our adventure into Brandenburg Gate and Bach's Brandenburg Concerti with Brandenburg Concerto number 1. And if you give us just a moment before each piece tonight, we're going to take a quick moment to retune for your sensibilities and for our brand new all Baroque violins and violas that we have this year, courtesy of the great assistance of Violins and More of Lynchburg and their luthier there, Sam Howell, who has helped us outfit the orchestra with all Baroque violins. We talked about that some last year when we made the steps toward it, and tonight is the night where we unveil all of our Baroque violins and violas for the first time, a complete ensemble. So bear with us as we initiate their tuning for just a moment before each piece. Feel free. Thank you. You certainly earned your first hole punch. That's great. We're going to turn to one of Bach's contemporaries, and we did some of this gentleman's music last season as well, Georg Philipp Telemann. Telemann and Bach were very close. Telemann was one of the godparents of one of Johann Sebastian's children, and they were crossing each other in career paths a lot. When Bach went to his final post in Leipzig to serve at the Thomas Church, or Thomaskirche there, Telemann was the committee's first choice for that job. He turned them down. And so they considered who else they could find, and they offered it to Mr. Graupner, who also turned them down. And then the town council wrote, well, since we can't find anybody really competent, we'll hire Bach. That was pretty much their comment. But Telemann was a star of the age. He wrote operas, he wrote symphonies, he wrote chamber music, and just about everything under the sun, including something around 1,500 cantatas. Bach wrote about 300, we think. So he's a much more prolific composer, which just means he wrote faster than Bach did. That one of the requirements that Telemann had, because he was so popular, he traveled all over Northern Europe and would serve in various cities. But he was a resident of Hamburg. And it was very important that he had his citizenship there. And in order to be a citizen of Hamburg, part of his contract for citizenship was to write at least a certain number of cantatas a year that would be performed and dedicated to the city of Hamburg. And so he would dash off a dozen and send them over to make sure he kept his residence. Who knows? That could happen that way. And one of the things that Telemann liked to do was write cantatas that he himself could sing, because he was a baritone, as I am. And so it's really lovely to have a composer that is written for you and your voice. It's really very, very charming. And there's a whole host of these, so just count on it for years to come. We're going to have Telemann cantatas somewhere on our program. They are, of course, written for the midst of a Lutheran church service. They would have been part of the liturgy, part of the normal experience of going to church on a Sunday, as would a 3-hour sermon. You'd just be used to these things. And you'd hear great organ music, and you'd hear all these things around it. This particular cantata was written to be sung and shared with the congregation during the time of the Eucharist, or the service of communion, the Holy Supper. And Telemann would have probably written the text for this as well. He was known to do that. And he writes it from a very personal perspective. There are 3 movements and 2 little what are called recitatives in between those movements. The first, he exposes his sighing, his angst, that why is my soul is just sighing for grief at my own inadequacy, my own sinfulness. I am lost. And then he tells the story in the recitative of how he is lost. And what should probably happen to him, that he should be probably thrown into hell. That's about all that's left. But the second movement, the second aria, is his walking toward the communion table. You can feel the walking in the bass especially, as it takes one step at a time, penitently, cautiously, almost fearfully, walking forward. And the text there echoes that feeling of coming and bearing one's soul and opening up to the forgiveness of God, which the second recitative talks about, after all, that he is redeemed. But it's so funny, it's almost humorous to sort of read between the lines of that second recitative, where it says, I want to do good things, I want to love my neighbor as myself, I want to study your word, I want to do everything right, but I can't. And he finally ends with, only with your help. And so the third aria is, come Holy Spirit, come Holy Ghost, and lead me toward redemption. And it's happy and it's joyful, because I think he's gotten to the table and he's turned around and walked back to the pew. So you hear his whole progression and the whole sort of sense of the liturgy of communion in this charming cantata by Georg Philipp Telemann. You notice that most of the orchestra left because they don't like to play these pieces, so I gave them the night off. But it's really, he writes it for a very small ensemble. It's very intimate, very personal, and the orchestra will be doing it conductorless for the most part, which is how it would have been done in the day. They would have shared with each other, head nodding, moving, and trying to relate to each other how phrases go, where phrases start, where phrases end, because it was very much a communal kind of music-making experience. So, Telemann's cantata, that I sigh, my sighing groans for your grace. And each of the slides now will have one of the movements of the translation for you. You don't have to look down at the programs if you just want to look up and be inspired.
besteht. Das Gewissen beißet mich, Höll und Abgrund öffnen sich. Die Gebeine sind zerschlagen, und das Mark ist ganz verzehrt. Die Gebeine sind zerschlagen, und das Mark ist ganz verziert, ganz verziert. Soll ich nicht von Jammer tagen, da die Sünde nicht besteht, soll ich nicht von Jammer sagen, soll ich nicht von Jammer sagen, da die Sünde nicht besteht, da die Sünde nicht besteht. Ach Gott, ich will es nur bereuen, dass ich gesündiget im Himmel und für dir. Ich bin nicht wert, dein Kind nicht mehr zu nennen. Vielmehr verdien ich, dass ich mich des Stießes und vier in Qual und Flammen schmachten ließest. So aber fleh ich dich dein Erbarmen an und bitt Christi willen, du wollest nicht an mir das Recht im Zorne fielen, denn dieser ist genug für mich getan. Willen, Willen ins Gericht. Du gehst nicht, ich weiß, du gehst mit mir nicht seinetwillen ins Gericht. Hier hast du Herz und Hand, womit ich dir Versicherung vergeben, mein Leben im Wort in solchen Stand zu setzen, dass es dich mög ergetzen. Ich werde mich im guten Werken üben, ich will den Nächsten als mich selber lieben, ich will dem Wort und Lehren mit Glauben voller Andacht hören. Und alles, was du willst, dass wir berichten sollen, hat mein Gehorsam sich für Richtschnur auserwählt. Doch, was hilft mir wollen, wenn das Vollbringen fehlt? Fällt dich nun dieses nicht auf eigenen Kräften kann, so ruf ich dich, herzlich dich, deines Geistes Beistand an.
orchestra in returns now for a real pièce de résistance, the Brandenburg Concerto No. 2. As I said earlier, was my early favorite as a trumpet player to find that music and to be inspired by it. And this ensemble changes a bit. You see now we have 4 soloists. They're going to come forward a bit and sort of find their mark here. I'm going to go to the rear podium to give them a little bit more space. The violin, the flute, the oboe, and the piccolo trumpet. And you may not have seen a piccolo trumpet. Would you mind just holding that up, Jake? There it is, yeah. Tiny little guy. He's got an extra valve there, 4 valves, more than normal, and it plays extraordinarily high, much like the piccolo violin played extraordinarily high. It really has a clarion sound, beautiful, beautiful, soaring over the orchestra, timbre and texture. Bach wrote each of the Brandenburg concertos for a different set of unique instruments to feature his own ability and to feature the musicians also that he had in hand. It's rumored that Bach had between 14 and 16 musicians in mind that he would have played these pieces with, and some of them would have doubled. Oboes would have doubled on flute, violins would have doubled on viola, and that sort of thing to make these pieces work with very minimal troops that he had at his behest there at the court of Brandenburg that would have been able to play these pieces. Pastor Phil mentioned that Bach has often been called a great preacher at times with his own speaking. Time magazine in 1968 called Bach the 5th evangelist. That was their calling for him. And that followed a tour of Japan where it was said that the greatest number of conversions to Christianity was after a Bach orchestra tour of Japan that happened. So the words get spoken out in many, many ways. But we're delighted to share this very exciting Brandenburg Concerto with you this evening. Don't miss the concert coming up in February where we'll be performing Brandenburg's 3 and 6. And then May, I believe I've got it right, 4 and 5. And those are all picked not because of the sequence in order, but because of the instrumentation that will fall in the brackets of each of them. And then also our December concert, we hope you can join us here and again at First Evangelical Presbyterian Church for a beautiful celebration of Bach's Christmas Oratorio, the first movement of that, the first cantata from Bach's Christmas Oratorio, and some other beautiful seasonal highlights. Big highlight of our year, there's one typo in the program. That is our sharing of Bach's St. John Passion will only be on Good Friday. It's marked there as Palm Sunday also. That was an old plan that got changed, and I forgot to change it in the printing. So watch for that on Good Friday. That's our whole season. We hope you can join us and fill out your cards and get that special prize at the end of the day. For those that are with us on YouTube, we're so glad that you are. On the live stream, we know that many folks come really from all over the country. We've been thrilled that over time, our YouTube audiences have exceeded our live audiences. So the range of our work is very exciting to see that go out to many people. Thank you for joining us. And you can make a donation online, you YouTube folks, if you'd like. Just go to the St. John website, that little give button, and fold down to Roanoque Baroque, and it'll be right there for you. So feel free to join us in that way, too. Thank you so much, and we'll continue with this wonderful opportunity to hear Brandenburg Concerto No. 2. real special treat to end this evening's program. Not only the music, but also there's a beautiful treat set up afterwards in St. John Cafe, just outside that door. Some wonderful reception planned for you. So come and mingle with the musicians, share with us, and feel free to be a part of the evening and part of the ensemble as they gather. And we'd like to close with this charming concerto for 2 violins. And we had 7 young violinists lined up, but health and other exigencies got in the way of a couple of their performances. But we have a wonderful troupe of young violinists that is assembling now that will join us. These are students of members of our orchestra and brothers of members of our orchestra who are in our community, and we don't get to hear them nearly enough. And we're really thrilled to bring them out and share them with you this evening and with this music of Bach, and they should be coming in from all corners. Are they hearing me? I know you're not alone, Melody. I know there's more than one. I recall very distinctly that we had 4 in rehearsal, so do we need to send for them?
Jennifer, I think.
Did Jennifer go to look for them? Okay, good. All right, that's fine. They'll be along shortly, I'm sure. But it takes a long time to cultivate a violinist. I know. I raised one, and raised a cellist as well. But it's years of playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star before they get to anything approaching a Bach double concerto. So it's a real challenge to build that layer upon layer upon layer upon layer, very slowly. The skill set ticks in. And there's so much, you can hear in the piccolo trumpet, you can hear in the solo violins and flute and oboe tonight. You can't think those notes fast enough. You just can't. It's muscle memory, it's the training of the fingers, it's something that just has to emanate from the experience of doing so many, many times. Art and practice to make that happen. And these young people are distinguished in having made those strides and come so far in their preparation and planning for this very evening. This is a piece that they often play in studio recital, but they never, ever, ever get to play it with a full orchestra. So this evening it's the Bach double concerto, violin or 2 violin concerto, with these wonderful young artists that we are very, very pleased to feature. You guys ready? Okay, let's take a tuning note. Our final selection, and please do join us for the reception, and please share the word about Roanoque Baroque with your friends and neighbors so that they might join us tomorrow, perhaps, at 3 o'clock at First Evangelical Presbyterian Church. And I've been meaning to say this all evening long. The city of Roanoke is coming out with a catalog of arts for community associations. If you are involved at all in your community neighborhood association, please talk to the people in charge of that association, because Roanoque Baroque is one of the featured artists in that catalog. And we can come and play for an event in your community paid for by a grant from the National Foundation of the Arts in the city of Roanoke. So look us up and call us. Have your neighborhood association call us. We'd love to be a part of your work in cultivating friends and neighbors and building communities in Roanoke. So watch for that catalog when it comes out.